dying in droves of cancer, and the air quality sucks in the city, and that's why people leave the city when they have children or move to parts of the city. It's because they have better air quality, right? Because never once has New York City been in compliance with the Clean Air Act. And what those indicators are showing us is that when chronic, constant violations of the most rudimentary environmental laws in the United States are a matter of daily affairs, that we're not advanced, we're not intelligent, we're actually ignorant and dying of cancer because of our stupidity. And we're talking about 2 in 1 cancer rate for men in this country and a 3 in 1 cancer rate for women. Any movement that doesn't address what's going on with the chronic systemic contamination of the air, water, soil, and genetic integrity of the American people is not a movement that's addressing the core disease. And the core disease that we're trying to deal with is the fact that corporations are running away laughing all the way to the bank because of government and corporate collusion, which is called the revolving door, which is when people work for Monsanto and then become the head of the USDA and then go back and work for Monsanto. And that's the kind of thing that we just consider to be a matter of how we do business and run our government in the United States, right? That's why Robert McNamara, during the Vietnam War, who was Secretary of Defense, had also been the head CEO for the Ford Corporation before he came on as the Secretary of Defense. So there's a direct conflict of interest in the United States in the way that our government works. And that clear conflict of interest is the fact that corporations are constantly allowed to manipulate what it is that we're doing in terms of what does it mean to have a government that's actually by the people and for the people. And what I would suggest is that what permaculture is about redesigning how it is that we arrange our way of doing business and meeting our needs and living our lives as citizens who have a sense of personal integrity and a high sense of quality of life. And then we say that what it is we want to reclaim is our personal integrity and our quality of life. And what it is that we've sacrificed on this totem of some consumer society symbolic aspiration that people are chasing after, that's giving them no sense of contentedness or fulfillment or groundedness or direction, which generally is why we have over 500,000 children in the United States on mood stabilizing drugs, is because of the fact that there's a malaise. It's called post-modernity. And in post-modernity, there are no values, there is no sense of direction, and we've lost any collective agreement upon what matters. And what permaculture is interested in doing is in breaking things down to the level of deconstructionism where we can get back to the core sense of what matters. In order to get to a core sense of what matters, you have to uncondition your conditioned mind, to use a Buddhist analogy. And unconditioning the conditioned mind is about disconnecting from the constant propaganda of the material media wheel, right? In order to turn on, you have to turn off. And you have to turn off from constantly having information that is not actually telling you anything but what people want you to pay attention to streaming into your field of awareness. And instead, what we should be paying attention to is what we notice without any stimulus inputs when the sun rises and when the sun sets. Because we live on a planet that's been circling this sun for 4.5 billion years. And what permaculture is about waking up to that and saying, let's come out of the cave of cultural delusion and paranoia. And let's wake up and notice that the sun rises and sets on an amazing planet that has these incredible energetics and dynamics that we have not been paying attention to in general in this society. We're not good Indians. We do not wake up with the sunrise. We do not go to bed with the sunset. We live out of sync with the diurnal rhythms of how this planet works. And as a result, in general, the culture is suffering from nature deficit disorder. The nature deficit disorder could be described as what's causing Crohn's disease even, which is analogous to something that is basically occurring to over 500,000 Americans and is a result of intestinal problems that is directly related to the fact that we are disconnected from healthy microbiological communities that have been part of our evolutionary history for the past 4.5 billion years of life on Earth, right? If you look at the origins of human beings, you'll see that we go back to 4.4 million years ago as the first bipedal hominid these days that's been found, predating Lucy. Lucy was about 3.5. So we're now going back 4.4 million years ago as an organism on the planet. And you ask yourself, like, so how much collectively of human history have we spent disconnected from diverse microbiological communities? It's a very short amount of time. And what's happening to the human physiology is we are having cascade effects of ill health, immunological disorders, and digestive disorders directly as a result of disconnection from healthy biodiverse ecosystems. The reason why people are getting sick, the reason why people are on so many mood stabilizing drugs is because of the fact that their hands don't touch soil, they don't climb trees, and if they touch the soil, they better be worried about lead and mercury contamination if you're in this landscape. Right? So it's a catch-22 situation in terms of our urban environment right now necessitating a certain amount of getting out of it so that we can actually reconnect with healthy soil, with healthy air and healthy water. So permaculture is really this idea of how as human beings do we individually and collectively start to reconnect with what it is that our true health and well-being come from. And what those things come from is a connection to tangible, visceral experiences of things that are going to give us health, like good food, like good company, like good water, like good air to breathe. Right? And as long as we don't have good air to breathe, as long as we don't have good company, as long as we don't have good food that's grown in healthy soil, as long as we don't have good water, we're not advanced, we're devolved, we are suffering as a population. And that can be directly historically understood as something that has been a human precipitated set of circumstances. So what permaculture is about is taking responsibility and ownership for our own destructive tendencies and changing them to become a healing organism on the planet, primarily for our own best interest. Because the organism that's going to lose out, the organism that right now is dying in inglorious ways, the #1 cause of death in the United States. Very inglorious way to go. Automobile accidents. It shows why our infrastructure and substitution is a clear misconception as a conversation to even be putting any energy into. Right? So people want to talk about biofuels and how we're going to just stick a different thing into the tank, but we'll have hybrid taxi cabs. You know what? That's not going to change the #1 cause of death being automobiles. The reason why that's happening is because cars are used and trucks are used for an inordinate amount of moving materials around in circumstances where we should be using trains, and in circumstances where cars are just a totally inappropriate way to have things be moved through the landscape. I mean, as you think about how as a culture are we making type 1 errors in our way of meeting our needs, you want to realize that one of the things that has to change is our common space in our landscape being held hostage to the automobile. Because the automobile completely dominates New York City, for instance, and holds us hostage to it. I would argue that one of the largest, and John Wargo, who wrote a book called Green Intelligence, who's the chair of the Department of Forestry at Yale, so I think he has some credibility. What John Wargo said in Green Intelligence is that one of the 4 biggest mythologies in the United States is that vehicle emissions are not a hugely problematic toxic exposure event. Huge. One of the 4 that he puts up there is also nuclear testing, and the legacy of hiding the true danger to the American public of the ludicrous experiments that the United States government has undertaken in collusion with private industries. Nuclear testing, a fun one that I always love to hold up to audiences, is something to throw some numbers out there. Let's have a little number game where we say, anybody know how many bombs have been blown up inside the continental United States other than students of mine who are here? Who might know the answer to that question. Anybody know? Department of Defense numbers I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like Greenpeace, Lefty, Pinko, Sierra Club numbers. Right? What is a right-winger gonna say the numbers are, right? What the Department of Defense says, that's the numbers. 905. So we blew up 2 on another country, which Reed Howard Zinn, People's History, what he'll say and other historians will say is that Nagasaki was nothing more than a test. Hiroshima made the point. Right? As far as flexing our might, which is what bikini and thermonuclear and hydrogen bombs were all about, was another flexing of our might, right, overseas. Hiroshima made the point. Second bomb was not necessary. Right? 905, however, were necessary inside the continental United States in the Nevada Trinity test range. 500 above ground and 405 below ground, according to the Department of Defense. So John Margo, Green Intelligence, that's one of the 4 that he says big top ecological catastrophes of the American landscape is the history of nuclear testing. And the cleanup that people like Westinghouse, General Electric, DuPont, Ciba-Geigy have left for us to pick up with our tax dollars. Check out what the Department of Defense and the DOE say, because don't worry, the DOE is taking care of it. The Department of Energy has been handed the responsibility from the NRC to take care of the cleanup of these multi-billion-dollar, highly radioactive debaucheries. It's estimated by the EPA that the Hanford site, which is where they manufactured and refined the uranium for Fat Man and Little Boy, which is about the size of